Note: this video only adapts an excerpt of André Kanasiro's full article. Read it in its entirety in Volume 53, Issue 2 of Spectrum's journals, which are archived as free PDFs on our website, spectrummagazine.org, which is linked in the description. How Rosemary's Baby Helps Us Think About God and Society by André Kanasiro. Despite widespread fear for the subgenre, Christians have a lot to learn from horror, both in literature and in cinema. Contemporary Christianity owes much of its beliefs and dominant emotions to American horror, as thoroughly demonstrated by The Exorcist Effect, Horror, Religion, and Demonic Belief by Eric Harrelson and Joseph Laycock. Horror should matter because, as a literalization of our current condition, a metaphor made real, it is a mode of narration that makes us shiver and tremble by saying the quiet parts out loud. In essence, horror is the genre above all others that pushes beyond the hurt to the open wound. Horror is what bleeds. That somewhat cryptic, poetic statement on the nature of horror and why it matters to Christians can be clarified through a case study on a seminal horror story with a controversial legacy, Rosemary's Baby. Published as a novel by Ira Levin in 1967 and released as a movie 1 year later, Rosemary's Baby is arguably among the most influential horror stories of the 20th century. The story follows Rosemary and Guy, a young couple who move into the Bramford, a massive old building in New York City. As it happens, most of the building's inhabitants are wealthy members of a Satan-worshipping secret society, and Guy, with the promise of a successful career as an actor, assists them in their plans to have Rosemary drugged, raped, and impregnated by the devil so she can give birth to the Antichrist. Positioned mostly from Rosemary's point of view, the story progresses as she, increasingly alienated from her friends and support communities outside of the Satanic coven, slowly realizes what is being done to her. It is as much a horror story as it is a conspiracy thriller. Rosemary, as a journalist or detective would in other stories, uncovers a sinister conspiracy that undergirds all levels of society, learning she can trust no one. The significance of Rosemary's Baby for contemporary culture cannot be overstated. It was a major inspiration for the occult revival of the late 1960s, with many occultist and self-proclaimed Satanist movements borrowing directly from that story, as if it contained authentic occultic lore. It was also the blueprint for the most infamous conspiracy theories in modern American history, from the Satanic Panic in the 1980s and 1990s to QAnon in the late 2010s and 2020s, the latter of which added Democratic politicians, including those accused in the now debunked Pizzagate, to a cabal of devil-worshipping, sex-offending celebrities. In a cruel twist of fate, Sharon Tate, the wife of the film's director Roman Polański, would be murdered by the followers of cult leader Charles Manson just a year after the movie's release. And in 1977, Polański himself would be accused of drugging and raping an underage girl, with multiple other women making similar accusations in recent years. The movie would eventually be cemented as a horror classic alongside The Exorcist, which represents a Catholic worldview, and The Omen, influenced by Protestant dispensationalism. Those three films would be dubbed the Unholy Trinity of cosmic horror films, recognized later for providing the core demonological belief structure, images, and language for most Christians today. Many biblical literalists and cultural Christians unwittingly filled in textual blanks with images and ideas inspired by these movies. Commenting on the controversial legacy of the story he wrote, Levin confessed, "I feel guilty that Rosemary's Baby led to The Exorcist, The Omen. A whole generation has been exposed, has more belief in Satan. I don't believe in Satan, and I feel that the strong fundamentalism we have would not be as strong if there hadn't been so many of these books." In that light, it would be easy for us to unequivocally condemn Rosemary's Baby as a reproachable, degraded cultural product that preys on people's fears and renders them vulnerable to being manipulated and exploited by political and religious figures. But that does not explain why people were drawn to it in the first place, or how it served as a literalization of their condition. We must reject the impulse to argue that they were merely uneducated, irrational, or superstitious ignorance in need of our enlightenment. What were the grains of truth found by the Americans that were so influenced by that story? It is here that horror studies can help us the most, as well as literary critics such as Frederick Jameson. In an influential 1979 essay named Reification and Utopia in Mass Culture, U.S. literary critic Frederick Jameson established the method of analyzing works of art, whether they are regarded as high culture or products of mass culture. His approach, further explored in his other works such as The Political Unconscious, Narrative as a Socially Symbolic Act, takes seriously the ways in which under capitalism, the older traditional forms of human activity are instrumentally reorganized and tailorized, analytically fragmented and reconstructed according to various rational models of efficiency, and essentially restructured along the lines of a differentiation between means and ends. This forms a process called reification, which foregrounds the organization of the means themselves over against any particular end or value which is assigned to their practice. Inasmuch as this process crystallizes human activities as commodities and prioritizes their exchange value over any other purpose, reification is closely tied to repression. People are not allowed, or may not even be able, to question why an activity couldn't serve a goal beyond maximizing profit. That applies to all kinds of human activities, including art, since now they can be separated out from their unique qualitative differentiation as distinctive types of activity, and all universally ranged under the common denominator of the quantitative, that is, under the universal exchange value of money. However, in order to be effective as a commodity, a work of art must appeal to people's desires and wishes, and analyzing that contradiction between repression and wish fulfillment in social terms is the crux of Jameson's method. Works of art, then, entertain relations of repression with the fundamental social anxieties and concerns, hopes and blind spots, ideological antinomies, and fantasies of disaster, which are their raw material. What then were the fundamental social anxieties and concerns underlying Rosemary's Baby? Read the rest of this article and more on Spectrum's website, spectrummagazine.org, where you can navigate to the journal subheading and read through a digitized collection of Spectrum journals.